Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, issued his first public message since taking office on Thursday, outlining the country's key strategies in its ongoing war against the United States and Israel. In his message, Mojtaba Khamenei called for continued military resistance, vowing to revenge for those who have been killed, and issued a stern warning against governments that continue to host U.S. military bases in the region. So, what to make of the signals sent out in the message, and what could it mean for the region going forward? Let's continue the discussion with my panelists from San Diego, Chile, Jorge Heine, former Chilean ambassador to China, and Mr. Lyu Xiang, research fellow at the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. But we're joined also from Northwest China's Xi'an by Professor Wang Jin of Middle Eastern Studies at China's Northwestern University. Welcome, Professor Wang. But before moving on to the discussion, just want to very quickly summarize some of the key points. 7 key points from the new Iranian leader's first public message. He offered condolences for those who have been killed, including his father, actually. He vowed revenge for all Iranians killed in the attacks. And he promised free medical care for the wounded and ordered compensation for property damage, requiring his officials to report back on implementation. He thanked the Iranian people and called for unity going forward. He pledged to continue military defense and maintain leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, warning of opening potentially new fronts against adversaries in vulnerable areas. He warned Iran's neighbors hosting U.S. military bases that these installations will remain targets, urging their closure, while reaffirming a desire from Iran to develop warm relations with all 15 neighboring states. You were looking at some pictures of the new supreme leader that's released also by his official social media account, although it is unknown when and where these photos were taken. So let me go to Professor Wang first of all. What do you make of this first public message in terms of the significance of him speaking to the Iranian people and to the world indirectly for the very first time?
Wow, Liu Xin, you are right. This is a very crucial statement because, on the one hand, it was the very first statement released by the Supreme Leader that after the former Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, was assassinated at the end of the last month. So everybody wanted to listen what really the new Supreme Leader, his words and what his kind of intention, what kind of strategy. And also, on the other hand, we have to know that during the past days, a lot of rumors started come out, maintaining that the Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, after he was just selected, he was also attacked by the United States and Israel strikes, and he was very seriously wounded. And whether or not he can still work as the supreme leader is still casted in doubt. So that's why his statement was very crucial, because we know that today is a Friday, and then yesterday was a Thursday, and inside the Iranian Islamic political culture, the new elected or new selected supreme leader has to give kind of the statement, or have to be appeared in front of the public every Friday. I mean, so-called among the day of the Jummah, the very religious important day. So that's why he has to be appeared. Or he has to give a statement. So that's why the statement become very, very important. And he released a statement. According to the statement, as you mentioned, that we could see a lot of detailed about his strategy, a lot of detailed about his intention, about the possible ambitious plans. But this is very important. Whether there were still a lot of ambiguities about his attitudes about the war, about a lot of ambiguities about the possible end of for example, the closure of the Hormuz, about the future status of the relations between Iran and the United States. But anyhow, this is very crucial. It suggests that Iran's political system is still working well, and the political transition still goes well. So I think it's a very positive sign, Liu Xin.
Positive in terms of clarifying the Iranian position, giving the Iranian nation the kind of backbone, the kind of message the people needed to rally behind a leadership that's intact. Ambassador Heine, how do you look at the first public message itself, the tone and the content of it?
Yes, well, what this message tells us is that what has happened in the case of Iran and the war being waged by the United States in Iran in Israel against Iran is that this is a war, was and is a war of choice. There was really no need for this. There was no immediate threat on the part of Iran to these other two countries. And yet there was this notion that somehow they would prevail. Yes, they decapitated the regime, but that doesn't mean that the regime was fall apart. It somehow, the hope was expressed by various authorities in the US government that there would be some sort of popular uprising in Iran and that somehow that would bring to an end the existing regime. That, of course, didn't happen. This is not the way the world works. Aerial bombings on countries have generally the effect of having the people rally around the flag. And obviously, Iran is very much a divided nation. The regime is not necessarily very popular. But what has happened is that a lot of Iranians are saying, well, we are not going to stand for this. Our leader has been killed. We don't want this. And the last thing we're going to do is to surrender.
Well, the regime in Washington equally is probably not very happy, and in Israel, they're probably not going to be very happy about this news either. Mr. Lyu, how do you look at their possible reaction? Because they have been claiming that this is a government that was not, supported by its people. Therefore, it's very vulnerable. The moment you strike it, it's going to collapse. Obviously, that did not happen.
Oh, actually, yes. According to President Trump and Israeli leaders, they think that this scale of strike against Iran could make the Iranian government collapse. But the rise of the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, means that the government is still there. And the country, the region, the government is still there, and the leaders and their people are still unified. So for the U.S., actually, they don't like to see the emergence of this new leader. But for Iranian people, it shows the consistency, spiritually and politically, the consistency of the Iranian government and its policy, its foreign policies. So in the coming days, we will see Iran will keep their counterattacks, and we cannot expect the war will end in a short time.
I think we have to be absolutely clear that, however the government, whether they're popular, whether the leader is popular support, it does give any foreign country the right to strike this country, whether its people like the government or not. I mean, it's just totally out of the question, but we're talking about it, but I don't want to lose sight of that fundamental fact. Outside interference is just illegal and just totally horrendous in this world and must be named, but must be called out. But I want to go to Professor Wang, knowing that this is a very hardline message and is going to be a very hardline position. How is it going to impact the situation going further? Are we seeing a full-blown regional war? Are we already looking at it, or even a global war, as some people may be warning against?
Lyu Xiang, you are very right that it is very crucial to mention, as you just talked, that it is a very direct violation of international law and the sovereignty of the other independent state that the strikes launched by United States and Israel against Iran recently. So that's why we have to be clear. And also, when we're talking about the possible future consequences, I think it is just the beginning of a new phase, because in his first very statement, he has to stress the very fundamental principles inside Iran. I mean, Mojtaba Khamenei, who is the son of the former the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and now he's the new Supreme Leader. So that's why in his very first statement released to the public, he has to stress and he has to maintain a very hard line or maybe a very assertive stance because Iran now is facing the very serious internal and external challenges. So that's why his tone, his rhetoric should be, to some extent, very rhetoric. But also, we cannot forget that during his statement released yesterday, that he mentioned that Iran wants to cherish the so-called, according to his term, friendship with the neighboring Arab states, which actually, I think, to some extent, downplay the kind of the worries about the worries from the neighboring Arab states, because now we know that during the past more than 1 week, Iran actually is striking the targets, the military bases of United States military bases in neighboring Arab states, but that further could lead to possible escalation of the war inside the region. So that's why when the Mojtaba Khamenei mentioned that Iran still want to maintain the friendship with the neighboring countries, I think it's the good news. It's maintained that, it suggested that Iran does not want the war be further escalated, be further expanded. I think it will be lessened by the neighboring countries. But then, as you said, we cannot ignore the possible factors or the possible crisis for the further escalation, because now the Hormuz is still under closure. The war is still continuing, and the attacks and the counterattacks that affected the neighboring countries is still continuing. So that's why we cannot ignore the fact that there is still some crisis, possible factors that could lead to further escalation. And that's why international assistance for mediation, for peace back, are highly needed and necessarily needed right now.
Ambassador Heine, I have about 1 minute for you. Do you see a possible off-ramp for, especially the Trump administration, because they were talking about regime change, then he was talking about Mojtaba Khamenei not being acceptable, that he had to kind of approve or handpick the supreme leader of Iran. Now that this is, the Iranian choice seems to have been made, and the resolve is very strong. How could there be any off-ramp for the Americans, at least?
Yeah, the off-ramp is not going to be easy. I think it's going to be quite difficult. But I think the key point here is what is happening with the oil market over $100 a barrel. The Strait of Hormuz has essentially been closed. The world economy is in serious turmoil. And this is something that obviously will impact the United States, will impact U.S. public opinion. And it seems to me that is something that might lead Mr. Trump to make some sort of decision of ending this war, because markets is something he understands very well and U.S. consumers understand very well. And the price of gas at the pump in the United States in the summer is absolutely crucial for what will happen in the November midterm elections.
Mr. Lyu, very quickly, what kind of solution? Well, China has called for both sides, right? All sides to stop the war and come to negotiation. But Iran, at least, have said it does not trust negotiations anymore. Any possibility, any possible way out, according to China's suggestion?
A good question. Actually, for both U.S. and Israel on the one side and Iran on the other side, these two sides could, for them, it's very difficult for them, these two sides to negotiate and got a settlement. So a major country's mediation may be useful and helpful in for letting the two sides to cool down. So it's time for maybe it's too early to say that, but a little while later, we could see some major countries' mediation could be helpful.
Time ran out. We have to close on this special edition of The Point. Many thanks to my guest, Jorge Heine, former Chilean ambassador to China, joining us all the way from San Diego, Chile. Mr. Lyu Xiang from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences here in the studio, and Professor Wang Jin of Middle Eastern Studies at China's Northwest University. Thank you all very much.